Well, Nick Fasoli, the bye week has not been a complete waste of time. It's not been in vain. In fact,
Mhm.
the Patriots got to sit home, do nothing, rest, get healthy. Belichick took Nike for a walk down by the San Katie Lighthouse on Nantucket, and they improved their playoff position. So
That's
a
right.
guy who broke me back in early October came out with just a huge assist to
Mhm.
the Patriots, beating a Bills team that all of a sudden like
Needed to
started
get
getting
hot.
there. Oh yeah, coming off like a game where they got completely bullied,
Mhm.
and I thought they were done in the first half. They came back and made a game out of it until Brady did what Brady does when he faces Buffalo and what he's been doing to them for 21 years now, and
Mhm.
came up huge for him in the overtime.
Yeah. I mean, you can take the kid out of New England. You can't take the New England out of the kid. And I don't think Buffalo's ever learned that.
Yeah, yeah, and you know what? That's a team right now. If I'm a Bills fan, and only by the grace of God am I not. I'm worried about the fact that they 400 yards of their
Yeah.
offense came from one guy. And Josh
Mhm.
Allen's great, but I mean, he threw for 300, he ran for 100, and now he's in a walking cast. I hope he's back for the game the Pats, play them in
Yeah.
2 weeks because I want to see that they can beat anybody. But yeah,
Twice. Yeah.
if you're a Bills fan, there's no way you're feeling good about being now 2 games behind
Yeah.
a Patriots team that you thought you had dead and buried back when they were 2-4.
I mean, look at them now. Josh Allen, like you said, walking around that air cast or whatever you want to call it, a walking boot. I mean, him leading that offense like that for 400 plus yards, 100 on the ground, 300 in the air. It's kind of like Lamar Jackson. But look at the way these two teams have won compared to before. The Ravens are now they're falling off dramatically. And I mean, you hate to say it, but I mean, the Bills, if they can't figure out their run game, they're going to be just down the same road as the Ravens. And
Right. Yep. It's just another case of Belichick just taking a team and breaking it down to its component parts and figuring out how
mhm.
to beat what they intend to do against you. And now that's going to get copied by other teams. And as far as the Ravens go, there's not a chance that I thought that they were going to lose to the rounds. Like
Yeah,
maybe I'm
no.
just conditioned, and plus, saw the Patriots just demolish the Browns a few
hmm
weeks ago. There's no way as I was going through these games saying, all right, who are we rooting for this weekend? Who do we have? Can
You
we
take the
hope to get help
Browns.
from?
Hmm.
Yeah, I said, well, the Bucks and nobody else. There's no way I was looking at that Cleveland team and saying, well, they're gonna give the Pats a boost, but that's a
hmm
huge one. So now
Oh,
they're
huge.
up. Yeah, they're up. The Pats are up. I think two if
Two
you include the
games, I think
tiebreaker.
it's two. Yeah.
Yeah, it's weird because everyone's played a different number of games, and there's so many tiebreakers. If there's a group in this bunch that I feel more concerned about than anybody, it's Kansas City, and I'm talking strictly
Mm.
about getting the number one seed. But I looked at their conference record, which is like one of the first tiebreakers. They're 4-4 in the
hmm
conference. The Patriots are seven
Seven
and
and
one.
one.
So all you have to do is hold serve against them. Just
Yep.
have the same record going forward. They can't possibly catch you. And then it's Tennessee. If the Pats tie them, they beat them head to head. So you know, I I think I know they have the best percentage chance of winning the bye week,
hmm
the number one seed, which is it, but it's still at like 49%. So
hmm
it's a coin flip, but every other team needs to hit, about 8 coin flips in a row in
Every
order to
other
be
team needs to
better than
finish
them.
out. I'm pretty sure, or it's coming to that.
Yep. Yep. And a lot of them will be playing one another. I
hmm
imagine so because they save all the division rivals for this time of the year. So it's pretty much, you know, Patriots take care of Indy this week. And then I'm pretty sure if they beat Buffalo the week after, that they guarantee winning
The first round bye.
yeah. Well, they're at least guaranteed the AFC East if they beat
Mm.
Buffalo, which means a home game in the playoffs. So obviously, still want the bye, but again, when you were 2-4, and the
Yeah.
division seemed like it was a complete, and
Shambles.
yeah, exactly. Like it was just a fantasy to think that they'd be in this position, and damn it if we're not living that fantasy right now. So it's a wild year.
Yeah.
As it turned out, wait until week 14 for the bye week worked out for the
Mhm.
Pats, because while you always want that in the middle of the season, the fact that they had to wait this long, well, now they're tanned, rested, and ready
Yeah.
for the final 4 weeks, and some of these teams got their bye week like a month and a
Week
half
8.
ago. So
Yeah.
yeah. And so, Nick, with the bye week and without a game to talk about, it seemed like the perfect time to just kind of pull back and look at the view from the Google Earth instead of the Google Street View, and circle back to Tom Brady, we talked about earlier, with the guy who is not only the co-founder of Brady's film production company, Religion of Sports, but the guy who's the director of the Man in the Arena series that's been going on ESPN Plus. We're 5 episodes into the 10-episode season 1 of this. So our guest is Gotham Chopra. In addition to doing Man in the Arena on ESPN Plus, he's started a companion podcast that's going to begin this week. In the summer, he did a series about Simone Biles called Simone versus Herself. That's on Facebook Watch. And in October, he released Passion Play, which is about Russell Westbrook. That's available on Showtime. He was really generous with his time. He was a really interesting guest. I mean, it had a lot
Yes.
to say because, he's
No one's
not
ever seen
only,
that view. No one's
yeah,
seen the behind the scenes of Brady besides, probably the very few in New England, but
probably a few teammates, obviously his family, and maybe Alex Guerrero. And it'd be great to talk to any of them, but this was a really great way to pivot during the bye week. And he has a lot to say, gives us a lot of insight into making the series, gives us a little tease about what's going to be coming up on it. Very happy to have had Gotham Chopra on. Let's roll tape. Gotham Chopra, I have this policy that whenever I talk to somebody who created a thing, right, whether they wrote a book or a song or made a movie or a wood carving or a sports documentary series, I always like to start with the first question, which is, are Tom Brady's eyes as blue as they are in my dreams? No, I'm sorry. We'll get to that. No, the question I always like to ask somebody is why? It's not easy to create a 10-part documentary series about anything. What was the reason behind doing Man in the Arena?
It's a great question. And I'll answer it on sort of maybe 2 levels. One, I'm a fan, that Steve Grogan jersey behind you. I've been around the Patriots, grew up in Boston for a long time. So I remember those Grogan days, the Tony Eason days, the Doug Flutie, Hugh Millen. I remember all of that. And of course, the great Drew Bledsoe years. And so I've been tracking this story way before I ever knew Tom, before Tom even arrived on the scene. And I just think it's sort of an amazing sports story. It's a story that should be told. It's one of those things in our lifetimes that's one of the great sports stories. Then there's also the fact that, independent of sports, Tom is, and it's awkward for me to say this because he has become a good friend, but it's being able to document Leonardo da Vinci or Michelangelo. There's greatness there that is beyond sports. And I'm just sort of obsessed with that. What are the component parts that make up greatness? And, would you pass up an opportunity to go, watch Michelangelo paint the Sistine Chapel and document it and understand what's going through his mind and, how that came about? So that's, as a storyteller, not just as a fan, it's what an incredible opportunity. And fortunately, I've built this relationship with Tom that he is open and trusting. And he's, the cool thing is it's sort of happening for him. He's not even sure. And so this was an opportunity to really together go back and really decode that. So long answer, but that's probably, the explanation.
No, it's perfect. As a matter of fact, it's why I've written 2 books about the Patriots for that very reason. I think that the Patriots writ large, but Brady in particular, are what you said, an amazing story. I think not just a great sports story, but I think it's unlike anything that's happened in American culture, American pop culture in the last maybe half a century. You know, his rise is like one of those great. And this is going to sound so like hokey to a lot of people, but I'm being 100% sincere when I say it's like an old like folk tale or like a comic book, you know, like that story of the guy who comes from nothing,
Yeah.
you know, 199th pick. He's considering becoming a catcher for the Expos and then becomes the greatest of all time. Like it's, you know, it's like he was rocketed to earth as a child and he's hard to humanize in that respect. And I think to your credit, you're doing a great job of humanizing him because he's from the outside, he seems so much larger than life. Was that hard to really get him to open up and share, to use the current vernacular?
It's been a genesis, and I mean, to your point, like I agree, his story is archetypal. It's bigger than him, you know. It's sort of, it's Joseph Campbell in terms of its. Sometimes I'm in disbelief, like how you know, because I'm someone who studied that in school and really like values that sort of structure and storytelling and all that. But yeah, like I think, you know, the thing with Tom and me is like it's been a genesis. And one, I knew so much about him, frankly, from being a fan already for so many years. But two, then as I got to know him, going back to like 2014 is probably when I first met him and started, you know, building relationship. And we worked together in 2017, 18 and on Tom versus Time, different series. And that was, you know, that was an intensive moment in his career, in his life, all of that. So we became much more close. And then this is sort of like, again, the evolution of that relationship more than anything. These are the Man in the Arena are the conversations we were having anyway, because the storyteller, the historian in me was like, oh, interesting, as he was coming to the end of his Patriots career. And while it sort of happened last year, you could feel it. There was a lot of discussion around that. He wanted to keep playing. Things were just naturally ending in New England. And so a lot of it, he was naturally thinking about his 20 years in New England. So these were conversations we were having. And then it was me as the opportunist who was like, hey, we should, you know, kind of capture this. And he was willing because he knows, you know, I'm not a reporter. I'm not here to break news or get behind the scenes too much on, well, who said what and all that stuff. I think there is a guardedness, you know, obviously with him and others in his sphere and at his stature. They, you know, especially in the current climate with talk radio and podcasts and stuff like that, people are always talking. But I think there's also then the flip side is like people like Tom are like, well, let me tell my story. Like, no, so-and-so doesn't get to tell my story. They weren't there in the room. They weren't there in the locker room. Let me tell you what really happened. And it's sort of cathartic for him. And I've seen this with others I've worked with as well.
Yeah, thank you for mentioning Joseph Campbell. For people who don't know, he wrote a lot about archetypes and myths and the monomyth of the hero's journey, which I know because I know that it inspired Star Wars. Like, I don't want to pretend that I was reading a lot of Joseph Campbell at my state college I went to, but it's very much like Luke Skywalker or I mean, Odysseus. I mean, you know, you can pick any great story and it follows the same kind of beats. That he's called to adventure, and then he meets this wizened wizard who mentors him. And only this is real. And I don't think there's too many athlete stories that directly parallel the way his has.
Yeah. I mean, like you said, it's all there. And people joke about, you know, Bill Belichick, you know, the role of Darth Vader. And all this was like, no, it works. It totally lines up, you know, and like, you know, he's a genius. Like he's, you know,
I'm making him Obi-Wan, but I know other people see him as Darth Vader, and I embrace
hey, Darth
that
Vader redeems himself at the end, you know. So it's like, and we're watching it again. He's got a young Jedi with him right now. Trust me, I still am a Patriots fan. This comes up with Tom all the time. I'm like, you know, Tom may have moved on, but I haven't, you know, like, and I'm excited about what's happening in New England. So
okay, I'm so glad that you specifically referenced Belichick, because to me, and as you and I speak, we're halfway through the release of the series. So we've seen 5 of these. There are 10 in total. And the thing that I find most refreshing about it is the through line so far is you get his total respect and reverence for Belichick and appreciates how much of his career was, is due to the mentorship that he got. Whereas around here, as if you turn on the radio, for 3 or 4 years at least, it's been nothing about the narrative about how these two guys can't stand each other and Belichick chased them out of town. And this really flips it on his head. Do we see that going forward without giving anything away? Do we see that he continues to?
It's a complicated relationship. It lasted 20 years. Tom talks openly about it in the series as it goes on. It changed over time, but I think underneath it all is this respect. That respect that you're picking up comes up pretty much in every episode. Tom will acknowledge that, and it's not just Belichick, it's Kraft, it's the whole organization. It's the 3 legs of the stool. It wouldn't stand up for that long without that. And I think Tom really acknowledges that, as do many of his teammates, already in the series that are some of the episodes that come out. I think Teddy Bruschi talks about, he's like, I'm a Belichick guy and I loved it there. And I loved the guy. I only lasted 7 years because it's hard to take, and right. Then later in the series, Julian Edelman, who's in it, talks about it. He's like, I thrived off of that. I'm here because of Bill Belichick, 7th round pick, he played quarterback in college, and he, ended up becoming one of the greatest receivers, certainly in Patriots lore, but maybe ever. Again, gives all the credit to Belichick, but he's like, but there are days I hate that guy, so it's complicated. Tom's relationship with Belichick is complicated, but even at the end, when certainly it was just different than it was in the beginning, underneath it is the respect. And you saw that, week 3, of this season. And you saw it even in the last few weeks. Somebody asked Bill, has he watched this series? And he hasn't, but what he said.
He's probably a little occupied this time of year,
yes,
sure.
Yeah, I don't want him to watch it anytime soon. He needs to focus. So.
But he was glowing about Brady in particular, and how he can't wait to watch it. And Tom always does a great job with those things. And again, it's the opposite of what we've been hearing really since about 2016 or so, and since that ESPN kind of hit piece came out about Brady being all petulant against Jimmy Garoppolo and demanding that people call him sir or whatever, never winning the Patriot of the Week award, which doesn't exist, which is strange. So it's really rewarding for me as a Belichick guy and a Brady guy who's like, I'm a child of their divorce. And it's not one of those 2 Christmases things. Like, it's really been painful to go through.
That's so funny. That's how I describe. Somebody asked me, how did you deal with week 3? And I said, it was like going to dinner with divorced parents. Like, I just wanted it to be over. I wanted everyone to sort of be happy and let's just move on, which is now what I'm thinking a lot about this, because to your point, like in the Joseph Campbell, like things tend to always work out for Tom, like story-wise. So I keep telling myself, like, oh my God, they're going to play the Patriots in the Super Bowl. And what am I going to do? Like, how am I going to deal with that emotionally? Because I'll always root for Tom, always become close friends. But I'm a Patriots fan. I haven't even lived in New England for more than 20 plus years. But every Sunday I'm watching Patriots games, and it's in my blood, and I can't like walk away from it just because my favorite quarterback did.
And you're saying this as I can call you a Brady insider. Clearly, totally. I mean, you're in the same production company as him. Is he involved in the editing process and choosing what clips to use and what things to emphasize?
No, I mean, during the off season, obviously the interviews, everything, stems from him, like his point of view. It's called Man in the Arena. So you got to get the man to sort of talk about it. So very much so. I mean, look, you lose his attention, rightfully so, the closer you get into the season. I show him cuts, like just because, again, I want it to feel authentic and like that we are capturing kind of his point of view, and he'll give feedback, but, or say, hey, we'll show him clips, he'll see things. Some of these things are 15, 17 years ago. And so it'll trigger something in him where he'll say, oh, let me talk about, Ted Johnson, or let me talk about Willie McGinnis, whatever. And then we'll go and do what we call pickups, But no, I mean, look, he's also, I've known Tom well enough. So I root for him on Sunday because he's a friend and all of that, but I also know because he's going to be way easier to deal with on Monday and Tuesday if he's in a good mood, and so he's involved, but pretty passively at this point because he's focused.
Okay, I'd like to ask one more question about Belichick before we kind of get into the series in a broader sense. And without spoiling anything, does Brady discuss how the relationship went south? And I think sour might be is too strong a word, but maybe you would know. Like, does he open up about when he decided he needed a change of scenery?
Yeah, for sure. He talks about just like the evolution, I would say, of the relationship getting more complicated. It's really a function of, I would say not even the dynamic on the field or in the locker room as much as like Tom's life got more complicated. The first three episodes, which are already out, there's a wistfulness in Tom. He was a young kid who came from nowhere. He needed that Obi-Wan in his life. He got that Obi-Wan in his life, and it was great. He got married. He had kids. His star grew. Like, life became more complicated. The relationship became more complicated. So yeah, he talks about it. He talks about it openly. Does he talk about it to the extent that, all the blogosphere and the podcasts and the talk radio guys in Boston are going to be satisfied? Probably not, because he's, you guys know Tom, like, he is not one to air dirty laundry, and I think the idea that there's so much dirty laundry is just misplaced. It's not true, at least from what I've talked to Tom about. It just like ran its course, and he wanted to keep playing. And I think the thing about Tom is it's not physically. We've all seen it, and certainly in New England, we all know about TB12 and pliability and hydration and all that sort of stuff. Right. He's got it dialed in on the physical side. He knows how to take care of his body and all of that. It's on the mental, emotional side that Tom has this unique ability to just keep on challenging himself, like keep on figuring out how to put the chip back on his shoulder. What is it? And I think part of what he needed at this stage of his career was like, he needed a new challenge. And that had nothing to do with Belichick or anything. It just, like, 20 years in a place is a long time. And for him to keep doing it, I mean, he talks about it in the series quite a bit, which is like, came into every season, and the start of the year was like, okay, who are we going to play in the AFC Championship? And there was this sort of like taking for granted that, and I think he needed something new. And so that really what drove the decision. At least that's, I never put words in Tom's mouth, but I'm now just like, that's what you'll see in the series, is like, you can feel it towards the end. It's not even the circumstances, it's him. Like, he just needs a new challenge.
And you touched perfectly on what I wanted to get into next is, I mean, you're a sports fan, obviously. You co-founded a company called Religion of Sports. So, I'm talking to the right guy when I say this. Rarely do you see a guy that's as driven as him, or a woman, any athlete really, that, they tend to hit success. And at some point you go, okay, it's natural. I've paid a price to get this far. I don't have it in me to put in 16-hour days anymore. And then you get the rare one that doesn't. I mean, obviously, right. Jordan, Serena Williams, Tiger Woods.
Right.
Do you get any more insight from the hours that you've watched of these interviews with Brady and watching the highlights of him on the field, what it is about this guy that he didn't pack it in like 4 Super Bowls ago? Why at 44 he's about to win an MVP and maybe take his team to a second straight Super Bowl? Because it's got to be more than the physical. There has to be just some weird preternatural superhuman drive in this guy.
So there's, I would say, almost like 3 things, right? He's super competitive, like, and obviously football being the thing, but like, I've been around Tom. I went to a 4th of July party a few years ago where he was playing Danny Amendola in ping pong, and Danny was beating him, and Tom just lost his shit. Like, he loves to compete. Like, he loves to compete. And I think he knows obviously as someone who's played, but also from his former teammates. So it's like, you've heard this before. It's like, hey, once it's gone, it's gone. You're never going to find, you can go into coaching, you can go into ownership, you can, coach your kids' high school teams or whatever. You're never going to get that same sort of drive or that same sort of high. So I think he loves competing. So that still drives him. I think Tom's a perfectionist. He might win MVP, but he still thinks there's more to be done. He still thinks like, can I get better? And he believes it, and he's always tinkering. So you see this in the off season when he's working with this throwing coach, Tom House, where he's looking at tape. To me, like, my favorite thing about working with Tom is not the season. I was with him this past weekend, before he played the Bills. That's fun to watch as a fan, but the really fascinating thing is April and May, or June in Montana, or April in Costa Rica, like to see how he's still sort of thinking like, oh, like if I change this to my hip or my throwing motion, or if I sleep an extra hour, like I could get better. So he's obsessed with that. And then the third thing, which I think is like, Tom's like driven by joy, like he loves to play, and he loves to have fun, and he loves the relationships he builds with his teammates and all of that sort of stuff. And I think he gets a lot of that still. Again, part of the reason moving for New England, I think he just was losing that a little bit. Like it just had become routine, because that's what happens like over time. The circumstances, the team, the culture, the organization, all that sort of stuff wasn't because of anyone. It was just because we all get used to like these habits. And so I think that was part of what motivated the change. Last year was a lot of fun for him. I mean, winning is fun, and I think that still drives him. So I think those are the three things that kind of keep him going. And I don't know, like, it's hard to, I ask him all the time, trust me, like, is this last season? When's the last? And I get different answers, like pretty much week to week, Right. So I don't get the sense that he's done anytime soon. I think we're closer to the end than we are to the beginning. I think that's a safe assumption. But
I don't know. I don't know.
Yeah,
with
honestly,
him,
like,
I wouldn't. People have been around here. People I've talked to, people on the radio, whatever. They really started talking about his decline like 10, 12 years ago by now. I don't know when it actually began. Like, what, you got to start thinking about the end of the line. And my point was always kind of what you're saying about the work ethic and how driven he is. Like the stories, and it's come up in the show about guys going to the gym in the morning and trying to beat him there, and he was always there ahead of him. And my point with him was always getting out of bed at whatever ungodly hour to be at the gym before all his teammates, and think about who's in the bed that he's leaving.
Yeah.
Not many human beings would be able to like have a spouse like that and say, what, this would be great, but I've got to go, hit the resistance bands before Rodney Harrison gets there. And I mean, just to make an old reference, and the fact he's still doing it today, I can't process it. And there's a reason why.
I mean, if we're watching this weekend, the ball he threw to Mike Evans in the back of the end zone.
Yep.
I mean, it's as good as any throw he's ever made in 20 years, as good as Aaron Rodgers or, Patrick Mahomes or all these guys that we still consider, Tom's right there. And look, it's football. So it's like these other guys are really good. And if you're looking at it week to week to week, you'll always find a reason to be like, I don't know, maybe he's slowing down, maybe this, maybe that. Or you'll find that throw, or you'll find he scrambled. He I think he ran for like 12, 13 yards on a play. He
had 3 first downs on one drive.
Yeah. So but again, he loves that. He feeds off of that. I know he's a ignore the noise guy, that's like one of his things, but he hears the noise. He hears it, he knows people are always judging him on his age, his arm strength or whatever. And he needs that. I mean, he needs that chip, he's been so good. It's one of his gifts of like always finding that thing to motivate himself, and it goes back to the 199th pick and all the mythology that's out there. But he still finds it week to week to week. I heard somebody yesterday or this morning saying, oh, well, it's pretty obvious that Josh Allen was the best quarterback on the field. I mean, can you imagine?
Chris Sims said that. And it's time to send a social worker to Chris Sims to say, here's a doll. Tell us where you got hurt. Because his brief cup of coffee with the Patriots has led to this lingering resentment to Brady, because Mr. and Mrs. Josh Allen wouldn't say he was the better quarterback on the
But
field.
thank God for Chris Sims. Thank God for, Max Kellerman. Thank God for all these guys. Because, like as the filmmaker in me, like, and if you've seen the series, like we use that stuff all the time because it's, you need to create tension, and that's where it comes from. It's still there. You can just, it's predictable every week in a win, like it's going to be there.
Well, that was one of the fascinating parts of many in the first episode, the one from the 2001 season. I'm sorry, strike that. The second one, the 2003 season, was the one that began with Lawyer Malloy, and then he goes to Buffalo and they lose 31-0. Book ended with a 31-0 win. But the impetus for that whole season was the national media crashing down on the Patriots, and Tom Jackson famously saying that, they hate their coach. And, Rodney Harrison said, we heard that. Brady sort of seemed to say, well, we didn't pay attention to the outside noise, but then kind of said that it motivated him. So you're telling us that he does have a pretty good antenna when it comes to receiving these negative signals.
I think there's a paradox. I definitely acknowledge the paradox. He definitely hears it, if not him. Somebody will send it to him, or somebody will say something to him. It's like, oh, I heard this crazy thing, in his inner circle, friends, family, whatever. So he's aware in general of it. And if not the specific thing, it's always there, right? Like, and now in a world of social media, it's there. But again, Tom's gift is like to take it and to quickly sort of like transform it into motivation. And then it's sort of irrelevant who said it, in what context, etc. It's just noise. And now he's able to he and his teammates, and he picked this up, not, Tom didn't invent these techniques. Belichick's the master, as is like his teammates. I mean, so much of what you see now is a function of like the Rodney Harrisons, the Lawyer Malloys, the Teddys, Mike Vrabels, just like that whole generation of players. That's sort of like part of his DNA now. That thing you talked about, getting to to the weight room before, this edgers mentality, he called it. Like, he still has that. And I think he now, even though he's, quantumly older than his teammates, but you can see that with his teammates down in Tampa. Like, he's started to really imprint that upon, his teammates down there. And there's a edger mentality down there that I think obviously is servicing them really well.
Yeah, I've realized for sure that he hears the negativity back. It was during the 2007 season, the 16-0 season, where they went to Pittsburgh.
Yeah.
And there was I'm flaking on the safety's name, but he guaranteed a win. And Brady just tortured him all night and ran up into his face at one point and just said, in the end zone after a touchdown, and just said, I'm gonna come all day long. And that was a long time ago. And I imagine he didn't just sort of unlearn that behavior of taking this raw material and refining it into jet fuel and using it to. I mean,
we're still finishing episode 9 right now. And that's the one where, the last Super Bowl with the Patriots. And he talks about going into that AFC Championship game in Kansas City. What an amazing game. And he has that comment, I can't remember, in the divisional round, where he says, I know everyone thinks we suck and, like, we have no chance. But he, again, is attuned to it. I don't know if people really thought they suck. I mean, this is, 8 Super Bowls in. I mean, people probably have respect and think, man, if anyone can go into Arrowhead and beat the Chiefs, it's probably the Patriots. But in his mind, he's able to, like, that's the gift. It's like, oh yeah, okay, it's us against the world. Somehow we're the David in this David versus Goliath, even though it's the Chiefs. And, what have they really accomplished at that point?
Right.
He has this ability, and it's not a trick. It's like he really kind of buys into it. His teammates buy into it. We all know how it plays out. So,
and without giving anything away, one of the most frustrating things, maybe the only frustrating thing about being a Brady sexual all these years, has been his like obsession with taking what I call the dreaded high road. and not publicly saying, never has heard a discouraging word about anybody. Does he get into Roger Goodell? Because I've been wanting him to F-bomb that guy for about 4 straight Super Bowl MVP trophies and just lay into Ginger Satan and tell him what he thinks. As you get into the Deflategate thing, which is still the most ridiculous controversy in the history of the world, does any of the anger that we all felt come out, or does he stay Brady on
No,
that?
I mean, look, like I said, I'm sure a lot of the fans are not going to be, they want the full, just like to sort of satisfy their need for vengeance. Tom is Tom, and he's going to take the high road. I also think just naturally he moves on, he's a big believer, and you hold on to that stuff. It's ultimately going to only affect you. It's interesting because, not to go in completely, but so Tom and I have become really good friends. We have kids the same age. I have a son who's going through something, that's sort of beating him up a little bit. He's been wronged. And I told Tom about it, and Tom's like, let me talk to him. And he really sort of gave him a motivational speech. And I was just the dad in me, the friend in me was just really, Tom's moved on. He really has. And so it doesn't, I think he knows, sure, does he burn about it? Is he annoyed and, feel wronged? Yeah, but, he's not going to let that get in the way of what he still wants to achieve. It's funny because in episode 7, not to give it away, but his sisters are prominently featured in that. And man, they definitely have strong opinions. Look, the NFL has been a great partner of ours, NFL Films, so we also have to be respectful of that. It's part of the mythology. Honestly, if Deflategate hadn't happened, if Roger Goodell hadn't happened, would Tom have gone to it's 4 Super Bowls since then? I mean, I don't know. If that hadn't happened, he may have just been he had been in 6 Super Bowls at that point. It's pretty good.
Yeah. So since then he went to the one in 2016. No, actually, so he won in 2014. That's when it began. Wins again in 2016. Goes again in 2017. Then 18 wins it again. Not a bad legacy for a guy who was never going to succeed without taking a little breath of air out of the footballs, which he never did. How was that speech to your son, by the way? Because I would give anything. If there was like a cameo that you could sign up to have Tom Brady give you a speech, I would. My kids would just have to pay for their own colleges. I would pay whatever. It's about honor. It's about respect. It's about your families. Your families will be honored.
It was awesome. I mean, Tom's just such a good guy. I mean, look, I don't want to. It's personal. This instance, very personal.
Don't betray any confidence.
No, I'm not betraying, but it's look, I know how it sounds. Oh God, more eye rolls, and Tom's so great and everything, and but he didn't have to do that. I told him something as a friend. Oh yeah, I've been going through this thing for the last few weeks with my son. Blah blah. And Tom was like, okay, got it. Let me talk to him. And I said, okay, I can FaceTime. He's like, no, let's not FaceTime. Bring him over to the house. Have him drive with us, from the game or whatever. And he just very genuinely was not for camera, not for anything. It was just my son's 14 years old. He's like, this is a moment for him. What is he going to take from this experience? And how is he going to, that's what Tom did, right? He's the lived experience. Something happened, he felt wronged, and he was able to turn that into his strength. And I think that's the speech he gave. So it was pretty great.
I love it. Oh, and the time we have, because your time is valuable. I know. I just want to get into some superlatives. So we'll start with the worst. What was it like for you as a Patriots fan to have to go through all the lowlights of the Super Bowl that shall not be named? 1 and 2, but especially the one in 2007, which stands alone in awfulness.
I mean, that was brutal. That was way before I ever knew Tom. So just a fan, and just sucked. I mean, that was the worst. Just because, again, that was like a rocket ship. That whole season, it was so much fun. But then the drop off is so steep. I'd say 11 was probably less. I mean, going back, I'm sure if I put myself, it was as bad as anything, but it felt in hindsight, the '07 one was the worst. And then the '17 one against the Eagles was because at that point I'd been with Tom, the whole year. We were doing that other thing. I'd lived with him, all that sort of stuff, ride shotgun, that whole thing. So I feel like I was personally invested also with him. So that was a different type of really sucked. But yeah, so that, they all suck, man. But it's,
you had to go through every play of all three of those, because I would think that would kick up some real PTSD. With all the respect to real PTSD.
Tom says, the losses leave the scar tissue. They're the ones actually you remember more than the wins, ironically. And I probably agree, man. Like those just sucked.
Oh yeah, there's a line in Rounders where the Matt Damon character quotes like some gambler saying like every great gambler can't remember their wins, but they can remember their bad beats with amazing clarity. And yeah, I've tried to repress those memories, but they're all going to come out in a road rage incident someday. I promise you. So what then, to look at the best out of all of the wins, which one stands out the most to you? And also because he's sort of relevant to this, to Brady himself.
I think that for me, again, probably right when I was getting to know Tom, but like the win against the Seahawks, was just unbelievable. Like that was like a heavyweight fight, it was a great team, and back and forth. Obviously against the Falcons, subsequently that one, I think, I had my son at that game with me, so that was a lot of fun. So I think that just, again, it's like you couldn't have written that story. So that was unbelievable. And then, from Tom's perspective, again, never want to put words, but, it's interesting is like some of the AFC Championship games, going back against the Steelers, 2019 against the Chiefs, those ones are as good as any. Like, and I think even Tom, I think he says that in like one of the episodes, is like, it's those underdog ones. You go into hostile territory, huge fan bases, nobody expects you to win, and those ones, there's something about like being on the road with your guys, and being in hostile territory. It's even better than a Super Bowl at times. And so, yeah, that, especially because my head's been so in it, like looking at that Chiefs game, man, that was awesome. And that definitely now in hindsight had this one last ride sort of vibe to it.
Yeah.
So that was a great one.
In the fourth quarter and overtime, I think he had 170 yards.
Yeah.
And then that overtime when he had 3 3rd and 10s and converted all of them. There's just so many. I'm glad to have a series like this because we've all seen all the America's games and whatever, but to have this and have it be more personal towards Brady, it's really an amazing piece of work that you've done. Before we go, Nick, you want to chime in here and say hi to Gotham?
Yeah. So you guys covered a lot. So you left me with little to talk about. But there's one thing I want to ask you, Gotham. Obviously, you said you began your friendship with Tom in 2017. So when Brady Gate became a thing and he was going to the free agent market, did you know America's Secret? Did he release any information to you?
It's interesting you asked that because in hindsight, I probably did, but I think like I just didn't believe it or I didn't want to believe it. And so I was definitely like, no, this can't leave. No way. Like that's never going to happen. And I think, like he definitely, I don't know that he knew it 100%, but there was a strong, he knew his contract situation. He knew all the politics and all that sort of stuff. And so yeah, I mean, look, I knew, especially as it started to happen, and then it really happened during a very bizarre time, right? The pandemic had, so suddenly there were no real free agency visits, or I think he was doing stuff like this with, talking to other teams and everything during that free agency period. He and I had a plan I had a plan anyway to sort of capture some of it and everything, but it all got shut down because at that point nobody was traveling or whatever. But again, I think he ultimately made it for more personal decisions than necessarily like fantasy football decisions. And Tampa just was the best option.
Yeah, well, let's see how it works out in the long run, because right now I'm skeptical. He's going to wish that he never left here. No, that's never going to happen. But I'm telling you right now, if a Super Bowl happens between
Oh
these two
God,
teams,
yeah.
it's gonna crack the universe. Like
Mhm.
all things will cease to exist. And Gotham, thanks very much for your time, and I'm happy to have you this week, especially because you yourself are releasing a Man in the Arena companion podcast. Have I got that
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, we have a podcast out. It's available now. A few episodes are out, and it's great because whereas Man in the Arena is clearly, or the video series on ESPN Plus, is Tom's point of view, but there's all these ancillary stories. There's all of us who, myself included, who's had this journey with the Patriots with Tom for 20 years. And so that's what the series really, it's like, it's from the point of view of the fans and all just like the ancillary stories that get kicked off. So it's a lot of fun and available everywhere.
And before we let you go, I'd like you to get the opportunity to plug some of your other projects. You did the Simone versus
Yeah.
herself series that's available on
Facebook Watch. That's like, we started with Tom a couple of years ago, then did something with Steph Curry, then Simone Biles.
Wow.
Recently did something with Russell Westbrook on Showtime. Did Shut Up and Trouble. We've done a lot. We have a lot of fun. This is a great world to be storytelling in. So I appreciate you mentioning those.
Yeah, and I really appreciate the stories that you've told and the one that you're going to continue to tell. So this is the first time we've spoken. I hope it's not going to be the last time. It's been it's a great series. I'm fascinated by it.
Leading up to the Super Bowl, Bucks Patriots.
Yeah, my God, I like the first one was my emotional Chernobyl. I never thought I was going to get through it. I was relieved when it was over. A Super Bowl, yeah, just I'm gonna have myself just put in a medically induced coma until it all blows over. But it'll make another great episode of Man in the Arena, the second season. But he's Gotham Chopra, excuse me. He's been a great guest. Thank you for your time and continued success with the project.
Thanks, guy.
All right, so Nick, we threw it out to the listeners saying that we've had now a film director on, but prior to this, we've had beat writers and national football reporters and some comics and whatever. And the people we haven't heard from so far in the however many shows, 15 Do Your Pods that we've done, we haven't heard from the listeners. So what do you say? Let's give this a go. We got some responses, right?
Yeah, we do.
We threw out a call to people that have questions, and we got some. Is that correct?
That's right. And the first guy is Boston native, and his name is Berg. So here's Berg, Jerry.
Yeah, what's up, guys? Berg here. Yeah, so Patriots, they're amazing. We love them. Go Pats. I'm dating this girl. Her brother last year, when they weren't doing so well, told me Patriots will never be at the top again, at least for another 10 years. Well, he's wrong. It's awesome. I'm relishing in it. My question for you guys is, do I buy him the shirt? Do I buy him that AFC East Division Champs shirt? Do I just buy every shirt all the way up until the end? And just at the end, just send it all to him in one package and just be like, hey, remember when you said we wouldn't be at the top again? Well, here you go. Here's a nice little present for you. Anyway, Merry Christmas, Happy Kwanzaa, Happy Hanukkah if you celebrate it. Doesn't matter. Go Pats.
All right. I appreciate the question, Burge. And as if I'm anything in this role, it's to be people's life coach. I appreciate the questions people are probably going to ask about the Pats and where we think they're going. But if I can help somebody in their personal life to work through their issues, I think that's really what the kind of wisdom that I bring to the table. And it's kind of what I was put on this earth to do. So here is my advice to him. Ordinarily, I would say never, ever buy the AFC East championship. Never buy the AFC championship. Those things exist for one reason and one reason only. And it's to trick older people who don't understand what the stakes are into buying things because they think, like their grandchildren are going to like it. Oh, my son likes the Patriots. This is a Patriots thing, right? When in fact, what they are is a ripoff. Those things are the equivalent of the Lamar Hunt Trophy in Foxborough, which the Patriots are using those to hold doors open and like, fix a wobbly desk or something. Like other franchises celebrate those. We don't. But tell me if I'm wrong in this case, Nick, but I think that the wise thing for Birds to do is to buy every Patriots celebration shirt and hat he can in order to rub it in the face of his sister's brother. It was a sister. I'm sorry, his girlfriend's brother. That's the one, right?
Yes, I think that was it. Yeah. And I
Right.
totally agree.
One, because it will remind this guy how he's wrong. And two, if this relationship succeeds and stays, serious for a long time, this is a good chance to establish dominance early on. Like if I had my life to live over again, I would have done that to my in-laws so that they would know that forever I'm the alpha and they're the betas. And this is his opportunity to do that. But otherwise, for himself, wait until it's a Super Bowl. Otherwise, we don't do that shit around here.
I agree. You don't want to celebrate too early. And yes, it's funny payback, but again, that's not a Bill Belichick way. We don't celebrate until the final game's played. So, Burge, good luck.
We don't celebrate anything but championships. Even
That's
if
right.
ever there was a year where you could celebrate something less than a championship, it would be this one because, this was supposed to be year 2 of about a decade of dominance by the Bills.
Mm-hmm.
And the Patriots already, I think as we speak, have an 88% chance of winning the division.
That's right.
Okay. You can feel good about that, but ultimately it's a pass-fail test. You hang a banner or you don't.
Mm-hmm.
But when it comes to, understanding that he's a superior in every way to his girlfriend's brother will not only, help him with that family, but it's certainly going to elevate him in her eyes. So best of luck to you kids. And never forget who hated the Patriots last year and who didn't.
That's right. The second caller is from Weymouth. His name's popping up as ASP. I'm not sure if that's just a bad translate, but here we go.
Hey, it's Steve from Weymouth here. I think that that Nick Fasoli kid you guys got going on that pod, he's the Mac Jones of the podcast. We bring it together. I think he's got to get a little more airtime. I think he's doing a real good job though on the pod. Also, go Pats. That Mac Jones is going to win Rookie of the Year. We're probably going to win the AFC. We're going to win the AFC East. Bills ain't got nothing on us. We're winning. Go Pats. Bill Belichick. Steve from Weymouth. All right.
Steve from Weymouth, that was.
Steve from Weymouth. And he could also go by Asp. Everybody in Weymouth where I grew up, everybody had a nickname. Mine was Radar. I can go around my neighborhood and I could tell you like the 5 nicknames of everybody who lived in every single house. So, but all right, we'll call him Steve, although I'm sure his friends have another name for him. And by the way, he sounded like every guy from Weymouth.
Every guy from Weymouth, yes.
Oh God, I love it. That's my hometown. We recently lost the late great George Young, the guy that Johnny Depp played in Blow. The
rest in peace.
He was the creator of the worldwide international cocaine smuggling trade, and he passed away tragically before I could buy him a cup of coffee at Bob's Muffin Shop or a beer over at Warren's, maybe taking a movie at the Cameo with him. But Steve, seek me out. We're going to have beers. His general point about Mac Jones. Listen, this is the sum total of what a horrible 2020 brought to us, that we're all going to look back at that season as that's the year that we got Mac Jones out of the deal. Yeah. And also, to a lesser extent, save some money so that they could sign these free agents and whatever. But it all would have been for naught if they hadn't lost those games in November and December, fell in the standings, missed the playoffs, and got Mac Jones. And so to me, ultimately, what that year will always be is a couple of years before you were born, but not ancient history by any means. There was one year in the late 90s between the Red Sox losing Roger Clemens and trading for Pedro Martinez. And it was a trade. Everyone thinks it was like a free agent signing. No, it was a trade. And so ultimately you said, okay, that year sucked. It was a drag to live through that. It felt like it lasted forever, but it ends up just kind of being the step back, the little dark time that you suffer. It was George Bailey going to Pottersville,
That's right.
and everything just like goes sideways in his life, and he's living this dystopian hellscape. But if it wasn't for that, he wouldn't have come through the other side. So yeah.
And guess what?
Ultimately, we're gonna thank 2020 for being
Yes.
a part of our lives for those horrible 366 days, because it was a leap year.
And guess what? You may be dating me a little bit, but without that trade after Clemens left, that would have never led to the best Red Sox of all time coming to Boston either. And that is David Ortiz.
Yep. There you go. The guy without whom they wouldn't have won the three World
03,
Series. The
04.
one guy who was central to all of them. And you know what? Right now, there's probably somebody on this Patriots roster that's going to be the equivalent of David Ortiz.
That's
it
right.
might be Matthew Judon. It might be Hunter Henry. We don't know. But that you know what? There's an older analogy too. There was a brief period of time with the Celtics between John Havlicek retiring and then Dave Cowan's retiring. You know, two guys that are in the Hall of Fame and won MVPs and have their numbers retired, and them drafting Larry Bird.
Yep.
And in this analogy, you know, Brady left the way that those guys did. They draft Larry Bird. Cowan sees, wait a minute, this team is on the right track. He comes back for a year and then unretires because he saw how good Robert Parrish was and said, I'm not going to stand in this guy's way, and re-retires. So yeah, sometimes the years we're talking about last lifetimes. You know, the Jets are still trying to recapture the glory from 1969. You know, Pittsburgh hasn't been back on top since the Roethlisberger won them a Super Bowl. Well, yeah, I mean, they had to break through. Yeah. And so the best part about this season right now is that the Patriots are on top, obviously, and that Mac Jones is playing well, obviously. But the 1A to those, the 1B to those 1As is the fact that everyone thought they were rid of the Patriots for a long time to come, that we'd have to keep going through more Cam Newtons or whatever. And now they've seen that they've got the quarterback, not just of the future, but of the present. And it's driving people in 44 states out of their damn minds. It's beautiful to watch. Here's a fun stat for you, Burge. I'm sorry. This is Steve in Weymouth.
This is Steve from Weymouth. Yeah.
Steve from Weymouth, right? Sunday, Trevor Lawrence, who I'm sure will be good. I'm not dumping on Trevor Lawrence, but he threw 4 interceptions. I figured out how many games it's taken for Mac Jones to throw 4 interceptions. His last 9 games, he has a total of 4. And that Trevor Lawrence has thrown as many touchdowns since week 9 as Brian Hoyer. Okay. Now there's the number 1 pick that everyone said is going to turn Jacksonville legitimate. The Patriots sat at 15, and now they've got the quarterback that every team in the league that doesn't have an established QB1 wishes they had him right now for the next 20 years.
That's right. All right. So after Steve from Weymouth, this guy didn't leave his name, but we're just going to go with him. So here he is.
Hey, what's up, old balls? Long-time listener here. Was reminiscing the other day looking at the Pat McAfee news to when you, AJ, and Pat used to have the weekly football podcast with Barstool. Loved listening to that. Wish you were still going. Would love to hear one of your favorite stories or memories from working with those two goons for a year. Go Pats. Let's kill the Buffs tomorrow.
Okay, caller number 3, which is what we're going to be describing you as. Yeah, I had a great time doing that podcast with McAfee and with AJ Hawk. My lasting memory of it, if I had to pick one story, it's always going to be one where McAfee talked about how they called a fake punt when he was with the Colts. It was against Pittsburgh, and lining up opposite him in the hole that he was supposed to hit was Troy Polamalu. And, you know, it any circumstances when you're talking to McAfee, you pretty much just turn on the microphone and you utter a syllable, and then he just starts running and you grab onto the reins and just try to stay on the saddle as well as you can. and we'd do 2 hours like that. But that story stands out. And the next one, and this was a kind of the yin to that yang, and I love talking to AJ Hawk. He's a great guy, and just, straight up as solid a person as you're ever going to meet. He and I had to do the show solo after the Pats lost to the Eagles in the Super Bowl, after Brady threw for 505 yards and still found a way to lose. And we're still trying to process like the Malcolm Butler benching thing or whatever. And he was great about it because he knew that I went on there as a broken individual. And, here were two guys who were just into the NFL for the fun of it. And I'm a guy who, while trying to cover all 32 teams, has like a emotional connection to one of them. So to be a guy who rode the bench for my JV team for 1 year in high school and talked to two like of the best at their position in the NFL over the last, I don't know, two decades or more was a goddamn thrill. And I appreciate that Dave hooked me up with them. It was part of the reason why I wanted to come back to Barstool. And, we all know how things kind of didn't go well on a business sense, but it was a mutual parting between Barstool and those guys. And I'm glad that they're taking this to the moon, and they can't have enough success as far as I'm concerned.
And that's why we're here. Do Your Pod is now the future. We're the Mac Jones of the original podcast.
Exactly. And I mean, did we ever pick the right year to do a Patriot-centric podcast? It would have been great anytime, but right now watching this unfold is, if we weren't chronicling this on video and voice, I'd be like kicking myself. Like, how did we miss this opportunity?
Yeah.
So this is a great ride. And I can't believe we still have another month and plus a month or more, the good Lord willing, of playoffs afterwards.
That's right. All right. So our last caller for today, another no name. So we're going to call her 4. He left you a nice paragraph. Let's hear it.
Hey, Jerry. Really excited about this Patriots season. Definitely going much better than I expected. So really excited to see them make the playoffs. But my only concern is that when they do make the playoffs, that there's potential for them to, shit the bed right when they get in. They lost an OT to the Cowboys. They lost a nail biter to the Buccaneers. Arguably held their own against both teams, but it's really the only two good teams they've really faced this season, given that the Titans didn't have Derrick Henry. Just didn't know what your level of concern would be with this team going into the playoffs. I would hate for them to get a first round bye and then, get embarrassed at home. Thanks.
Okay. I'm going to take the first part first and the second part second, caller number 4. Beginning with this season so far has been nothing short of a miracle. Even the most optimistic Patriots fan wasn't anticipating that with a rookie quarterback, that he would beat out Cam Newton, that he would figure it out, early in October, go on a run, have them as the number 1 seed in the AFC, not just in the AFC East, and be positioning themselves for a bye week in the playoffs. So my advice to that caller in a general sense is feel good about it. It's okay to have legitimate concerns about the postseason, but for now, just feel good about this. It's like this. If I gave you, Nick, a puppy, say you're my son, and you could very well be. If I said, here's a puppy, son. What if I said, okay, but here's the thing. Bad things can happen to puppies. He could run out into traffic. He could get worms. So never feel good about this puppy. I would just say, no, just be happy about the puppy and raise him up and enjoy the time that you're spending with them. And let's hope that he, is a successful dog and grows to a ripe old age. You see where I'm going with this? Like these people who are given a thing and feel okay, but what if it turns bad? That it's not a good approach to life.
You can't hope for the bad. You can't hope for the bad. You got to live for the good. And that's what we're doing this 2021 season.
Bingo. And what you can also do is take steps to prevent bad things from happening to either your puppy or your team. So put him on a leash, get an invisible fence, like feed him, walk him. Okay. So, with that, as far as my concerns in the playoffs going forward, yeah, obviously they caught Tennessee at a good time. Derrick Henry is tough to stop for anybody, and therein lies the challenge. Not just in the playoffs going forward, but I'll even say this game coming up against the Colts. It's, can you defend the run with a base nickel defense? I think that's more or less what their season comes down to.
Yep.
Can Kyle Duggar, who was coming back after a week off where he was really playing his best ball, like he had established himself as a pro, can he be stout enough against the run first teams like the Colts or Tennessee that you can keep 5 defensive backs on the field? And Davin Godshaw, who we fell all over ourselves talking about how great he was against the Bills, had a career game with 10 tackles or whatever. Those two guys are the key to this. Then it becomes offensively, it's as simple as, how does Mac Jones handle the playoffs? And, they're relatively healthy. They clearly can run against just about anybody. So then can you then use that, be a run first team and let Jones make enough plays for you to win games, to win playoff games? Because so many of these, if we've seen over the years, come down to, you're behind in the fourth quarter. You have to make it drive. Can he pull those off? Well, I dare say he's done it a lot already this season.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think that the pressure of an NFL playoff game is appreciably different than a college football playoff game.
Mm-hmm.
And he played out of his mind in those. Yeah, exactly. I mean, look at the game he had against Ohio State in the championship game, like 450 yards while taking his foot off the gas in about the third quarter. So, those are reasons for concern, but they're not reasons for pessimism. Does that make sense?
It makes sense, yeah. And then going off that point, I mean, we also need to see Mac continue to keep throwing the ball. Obviously, last game was a total different situation, weather depending, everything. The wind was destroying whatever you put up into the air. But going on the road after a bye week, you need to start off on the right foot. And I think Mac's going to come out throwing because people doubted him after last week's game. I don't want to say total doubt, but I mean, he threw the ball 2 times in the entire game. So I think the offensive play style is going to change dramatically.
Absolutely. Okay. Well, that was fun. I enjoyed that. I hope,
awesome.
Next week I'll try to keep my answers more brief, but you know what? I don't get to talk to people very much. It's just, it's me and you every week and a guest. And it's fun to get this off my chest because I try to say these things at home and it just falls on deaf ears. And
so for everyone out there,
just watching figure skating videos on YouTube and just going, right, okay, who's Mac Jones again? Okay, never mind. So
and for everyone out there, next week we're going to do this every episode. Call in, leave a voicemail, 929-273-0520. Again, 929-273-0520, and leave your thoughts for Jerry and me, and Jerry will tell you what he thinks.
Okay, that experiment went well. This was your idea, and I'm glad we're doing it. And I'm looking forward to being back here next week. We'll have another special guest.
Very special guest.
One of our very special guests. Yeah, someone that we've been hoping to get for a while. And we're going to have a ton to talk about because it's a game against the Colts with a ton riding on it, and the whole rest of the AFC playoff picture is a total cluster fudge. So it's going to be a blast having that show. So, all right, he's Nick Fasoli down in New York. I'm Jerry Thornton here on the fabulous South Shore. Join us next week. Thanks again for your voicemails. Slancha.